Right.
Thank you, David. Representative Crystal Quade, Missouri House Minority Leader, represents part of Greene County, including Springfield, which is District 132 in the Missouri House of Representatives. She was first elected in November 2016, re-elected in 2018 and 2020, and is running for re-election in the 2022 August primary. The Democratic caucus elected Crystal to serve as the House Minority Floor Leader for the 100th General Assembly and re-elected her to serve in that position for the 101st General Assembly. Crystal earned her Bachelor of Social Work degree at Missouri State University. She is the former director of chapter services at Catch Learn, a nonprofit organization that addresses the health, hunger, and hygiene needs of economically disadvantaged children in several school districts across Missouri. She also worked for Community Blood Center of the Ozarks, Organizing for America, and as a U.S. Senate Constituent Services Representative. Crystal currently serves as a board member for Better Life in Recovery and is a member of the League of Women Voters of Southwest Missouri. She also works with the Springfield, Missouri Community Focus Report Civic Engagement Team. In 2017, Crystal was named one of Springfield Business Journal's 12 People You Need to Know. 2018, she was awarded, I'm sorry. In 2018, she was awarded Springfield Business Journal's 40 Under 40 and was honored as one of Springfield's most influential women. Crystal and her husband, Kevin, and their 3 children live in Springfield. Welcome, Crystal. If I got something wrong, I'm sorry.
Thank you. That was an extensive bio. I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for having me. I want to say, Pamela, I think you took everything I had to talk about with the updates on what's going on with legislation. Just kidding. I really appreciate you sharing the Democratic Legislative Network and the action items that we've got going on. It really does make a huge difference when you guys engage and reach out to the elected officials. So I really thank you all who pay attention to that every week.
Ms. Quade, I can hardly hear you. Is there do other people have the same problem?
I'm hearing her fine.
Okay, maybe I just.
Are others having trouble?
Her audio's a little low, but it's definitely loud enough.
I was having.
Well, it is low, but.
As well.
I'm not having any trouble whatsoever. For those who are, you may want to try and restart your computer.
Okay, well, I have my volume all the way up, so I will do my best to speak loudly. I will give a caution. My 8-year-old is home from school today, so hopefully we don't get any interruptions. But if you see a little human come by, she's home today, not feeling so well. But thank you all so much for inviting me. I will do my best to give you kind of an update on where we're at legislatively. Feel free and interject with questions, put them in the chat. I do have my chat pulled up. And then I'm happy to talk elections or anything else that you guys want to ask about as well. So we have 2 weeks left. Pamela did allude to some of this, so I might repeat a few things. But I will tell you all, this is my 6th session that I have been in Jefferson City, and each year it gets a little bit more intense and a little bit weirder. And that I went through Eric Greitens as our governor, so that says something when I tell you the way things are right now is very untraditional. As of this week, there have only been 6 bills sent to the governor's desk. 2 of those are budget bills, so 4 bills have made it across the finish line. On an average year, there's usually about 160 bills that make it to the governor. So that gives you kind of a sense of where things are right now. And what's been really interesting about this year, and I'm sure some of you already know this, but we're seeing the biggest holdup really is within the Republican Party itself. Things really in Jefferson City are 3 parties operating. We've got the Democrats, we've got the Republicans, and then the Conservative caucus. Because it's a redistricting year, you have a whole lot of Republicans running against each other, either for House seats, Senate seats, or higher office. A lot of folks are running for Congress or for the US Senate that are currently senators. So because of that, what we're seeing is a whole lot of infighting and a whole lot of filibustering in the Senate, really amongst themselves. It puts Democrats in a unique position because we, instead of having to be in opposition constantly, we are more trying to figure out, strategically which side of these fights we should fall on to either stop bad bills or get some good things done. And it really has just been a different role than what we've seen in years past for what the Democrats need to be doing strategically. Just kind of a quick update on where some of the legislative priorities and things that I think are of interest to you all. The biggest and most notable thing right now in 2022 is the state budget. There's all of this federal relief money that has been sent down to our state, and we have found ourselves in a really unique opportunity to do some really serious good for Missouri, to invest in things like broadband, looking at childcare and how that's impacting our small businesses and our workers, paying teachers actual salaries so we're not the 50th in the state when it comes to teacher pay. There are a lot of things that we could go through that we are really trying to get done in the state budget. Pamela alluded to this, but we do have a constitutional deadline of getting that budget done by the 6th of May. And we are very, very slow in that process right now. So the Senate just this week did pass several of the Senate bills out. So I'll back up. They start in the House. We amend them through the budget process, through committee and on the House floor. Then we send it to the Senate for them to go through the same process. They have gotten almost all of the budget bills done through the Senate. Then it has to go to conference where the House and Senate will, honestly, we sit down at a giant table. We have representatives from both parties in both the House and Senate, and we negotiate the differences between the House and the Senate versions. That process is pretty lengthy. If anyone is really into budget and you're a nerd like me, that is a really fascinating thing to watch. Because it really is the only time in conference committee where we are literally at a table haggling back and forth, and it's kind of cool. Then once it gets done with that process, it has to go back through the House and Senate again. So there's still a lot left and not a whole lot of time. Then I will say we have a whole new budget bill called, it's House Bill 3020, which is the ARPA dollars. So you'll see for the first time, we have an additional budget bill where we are saying how we want to spend that money. When that went through the House, you probably heard a lot of critique from my side of the aisle about the way that process went, because the House Budget Chairman, Cody Smith, left billions with a B of dollars unspent because he wanted to have a rainy day fund. The unfortunate reality of the ARPA dollars is we do have a timeline that those things have to be spent. We are looking at a lot of one-time funding things, investments in buildings, investments in things like broadband, and some of these things where we can spend a lot of state money one time and not have to revisit it again, hand it over to local election authorities or local counties to do whatever the case may be. And so Cody Smith left a whole lot of money unspent, which essentially was giving a blank check to the Senate to do whatever they wanted. Some ways that's good, some ways that's bad, depending on how you feel about the Senate in any given day. And really depending on how, frankly, the conservative caucus wants to engage in this process. That bill has not been brought up for what's known markup in the Senate committee. So that still has the Senate committee, the Senate floor, then conference committee, and then the both House and Senate again. And that is really, really delayed. And so for that to get done by May 6th does make me very nervous. There has been some conversation about the governor calling a special session to spend that money if we don't get it done in time. There are pros and cons to that either way. But I think what's most important for our caucus is that we are actually spending this money. We have a lot of really great ideas that the Democratic caucus have put forward. We offered a lot of amendments. We got some really good stuff in the budget, but we are also encouraged that what we didn't get in the budget on the House side, the senators are planning to try to get in for us over there. And both Republicans and Democratic senators are working with us to do that. I do not often like to give shout outs to my Republican counterparts on the other side, but I do have to say my state senator, Senator Lincoln Huff, is the vice chair of appropriations in the Senate, and he really has been working with us to try to get that done. So the budget is where most of my concern lies right now, simply because it is the one thing that we are mandated by the Constitution to get done. And we do have a timeline, and we are not on track to getting it done in time, and that's concerning. We're talking about $47 billion that we're spending, and we want to make sure that we're doing it right and that we don't miss this opportunity, this one-time opportunity where we have money to spend. You know, every year I've been in the House, so this is year 6. Every year prior to this year, we've had to cut. And it's been I mean, you all have seen it. It's been, do we cut prescription drug funding for our seniors, or do we not fully fund Medicaid? Do we cut from our teachers, or do we cut from DSS childcare workers? And this is the first time that we've not had to do that, where we have a surplus of money and we can actually invest and do some cool things. So, you know, I'm hopeful that we'll get some good stuff done, but most importantly, it's getting it done in time. And so that's kind of the number one focus right now. I'll pause and say, does anyone have questions about the budget before I move on to other things? Okay. Does anyone want to, I'll give just one more second. Just go ahead and unmute
Could you-
yourself. if you want to.
Was the paying teachers more in one of the bills that passed?
So yes and no, and this is a tricky answer. So the governor proposed a baseline pay increase for everyone. That is, the Democrats supported that. We wanted to do that for all of our teachers. And there was, you know, the starting pay, but then as we know, teacher pay functions a little bit differently. So the governor was doing a big pay increase for everybody. We were very happy with it. We didn't think it was quite enough, but that's what he was trying to do. The House side then cut that and did not do what the governor requested. Instead, they inserted what is like a pay ladder and some funding for that. So we are happy about what we got, and it's and there is a bottom line pay increase in the House side. We're hopeful that the Senate is doing even more over there. And so then that will go to conference, and then we'll have to hash out those differences. Is it just the pay career ladder? Can we get the pay increases that the governor asked for? That's yet to be determined, and that will happen in the conference committee. All that to say, what the governor asked for and what we were asking for, we're not going to get, but there is a chance still for an increase. I believe $38,000 would be the baseline pay, which is about $3,000 more than what we had before. Not enough, but there is some stuff in there.
So Crystal, I'm an ex-state employee. That 5% is not on the table, except from the governor, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What you're saying. Okay, thank you.
And what she's referring to, the governor had put out the 5% pay increase, and Representative Cody Smith, I'll just be very frank and call him out, he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to give the pay increases. Now Senator Huff on the other side is working to try to get it done. So we'll see where conference lands. I do want to give a big shout out to Democratic Representative Maggie Nuremberg. She's a former teacher. She serves on the budget committee for us, and she was able to get some of the career ladder language improved so that we are seeing some pay increases as folks go up the ladder that weren't there before. But it's a starting place, but definitely not enough.
Crystal, question. I've been reading about this teacher pay increase thing, but I thought teacher pay was set in local school boards. Is teacher pay set at the state level?
So yes, we put the money in to the budget, and we can dictate that it goes to specific places for the school districts, and then the school districts get that pot of money, and then they have to adhere to the things we say specifically, but then the rest of it, they get to determine where that goes. Included in that discussion is school transportation. So the Senate version of the budget right now has a much bigger increase for school transportation funding, which is awesome. We're about 20 years behind where we should be in transportation, which is why we've seen so many of our schools go to 4-day school weeks. But that is an example where we can dictate this is where the money has to go, and the school boards have to listen.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the
Carl?
budget? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. My interests are a little more parochial and certainly municipal, but with respect to ARPA funding, and you mentioned the possibility of some of these things expiring. Some of the information that I get from National League of Cities and so on, some of my sources suggest that it's really risky to draw this out too far past the midterm elections and so on, because some of this stuff, even though there are suggestions about the time limits and so on to spend the money, some of this could evaporate. So we're under some pressure to make sure that we spend some of these dollars properly. That's the same issue with the state? Is that true in terms of some of this money being unspent, disappearing, if you will?
Yes, so that's a good question. I will say that, yes, it is of concern to me. So there are timelines of where if we don't spend the money, we have to send it back. Now, it's not the end of this year, but it's a couple years out. And depending on which bucket of money depends on when those timelines are. I would say a general concern, and there's no concrete evidence to say that this is what would happen. But there has been conversation on a national level that if the Republicans were to take back the majority, that they would claw that money back. And they would start with the states that haven't spent it yet. And so that is a real concern. And we've seen times in the past where money has been sent out, if you don't spend it by a certain time, that they will take it back. And so, yes, I think that some of my Republican colleagues have that hope, and that's why there's some delay in this. But there are some very specific timelines or deadlines, excuse me, that have to be spent by, regardless of that, kind of overarching concern. The big thing with the ARPA dollars, you won't see those deadlines being this year, but they're like a year or two out. But since we're looking at things, because this is one-time money, a lot of it is investments in building infrastructure. And you can't make a promise to someone, and not, folks aren't going to make an investment, whether that's a municipal or, like, say, a city making a matching contribution to fixing a bridge. They're not going to do that if they have that guarantee from the state that money is going to be there every year moving forward, right? And so the further we push that out, the less likely those investments are going to happen, especially on those matching dollars that we're looking at. So I do have a lot of concern that if we don't spend it, we will lose it.
Okay. Adrian, your question? Adrian?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Hey, Crystal, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Does that mean you've received the infrastructure dollars from the federal government already?
No, so that's a whole other bucket of money that's coming as well. So it's essentially been 3 buckets of money from the feds. And ARPA is the money that we're talking about right now at this point, ARPA. There will be a new funding source coming through, and I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but it's like INJ something or other. That is the infrastructure dollars. That those are not being discussed right now.
Okay, so are they, with your budget talks, are they discussing what infrastructure to spend money on at the moment, but with the consideration with this 9.1 billion coming to Missouri, are they taking into consideration with that money coming also and prioritizing certain projects?
Yeah.
Because of
the short answer is no, and it's been kind of disappointing to talk through. I have been surprised. I really thought that the senators were going to take that additional infrastructure money that's coming into account for this current budget cycle and maybe even appropriate it now. The INJ, whatever. And I apologize, guys, I don't know that acronym, but they haven't been. And I've been really surprised by that. And so that's why, we mentioned this special session. I wouldn't be surprised if the governor, if they don't get the ARPA money done, that the governor then moves ARPA and this new infrastructure money into one special session, which is a thing that he may do. But the short answer is no, they haven't. And it's been kind of surprising.
Sue or Herb have a question?
It's Sue this time. I just wanted to clarify 2 things. On the teachers' pay, is that a minimum grid for all of the school districts?
I believe so, yes. And I don't want to say that I'm 100% certain on that because we still have the conference committees to go. And so it could drastically change between now and then.
I recognize that, but I'm just asking, it gives a minimum, but the local school boards can give more than that. They just,
Yes.
Okay. But then I want to ask about the state workers. When is the last time they got an increase? Because they do not get an increase at all unless the legislature appropriates it and the governor passes.
Yes, ma'am, you are correct. We actually did one at the beginning of session this year. And so that was the first one, I think, in 10 years that we've been able to get done. And it was in the emergency supplemental budget. So state workers actually started seeing it. And what are we in April? The beginning of this month was their first paycheck that they did see that increase.
And how big was that?
I don't know that number offhand. I don't want to miss.
Oh, that's okay.
I know the governor had asked for more than what the Republican legislature gave.
Yeah. Why I talk about that is I was in person with the Office of Administration in Division of Personnel, and what non-state workers don't realize is there is no pay grid. So if the legislature and governor don't pass it, there is no increase. So when you say 10 years, that means you've had a steady pay salary for 10 years unless you got a promotion.
absolutely. And it's been real hard on our workers. And I'm sure you all know that we are ranked last in the country for our state worker pay, even with what we were able to give them this year, which was very, very little, but it was something.
Yep.
But yeah, we have a long way to go to get even competitive with the states around us.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Pam? Pam, do you have a question?
Yeah, yes, I do. It's more of a comment. Our county clerk said that the elections are not fully funded, that the Secretary of State had money from the federal government and he sent it back.
That is true.
So now they're trying to pass a law that nobody else but the state can give money for elections.
Yes, that is actually one of the bills moving past the budget that I wanted to highlight was, and you all have such a great clerk and get more information than most about what's happening. And we love her dearly in Jeff City. But yeah, so there is this omnibus elections bill that has been moving, and it got out of the House. It's now moving to the Senate. And one of the provisions, there's a whole lot of really bad stuff in there, voter ID, we could go down the whole list. But one of those provisions, to Pam's point, was about funding. And so a lot of our election authorities don't get enough money from the Secretary of State to fund the elections. And so what they do is they apply for grants. Some of them even have fundraisers and people donate money so that we can have elections in these small communities. There is in this bill that's moving a provision that says that they cannot take money from any other entity other than through the state government, through the Secretary of State's office. And so these local election authorities in these small towns who apply for grants to be able to have an election day, literally have to apply for grants to hold an election, won't be able to do so anymore, which is just mind-boggling. And when you partner that with other bills that thankfully haven't been getting as much attention, but there are some bills that want to move our election dates around and make add school board elections to November and shuffle some stuff around in terms of timeline of things that have an increased cost for printing ballots and all sorts of things like that, that our election authorities are begging us not to pass because they just don't have the capacity to do some of these changes that the Republicans are asking for. You couple that with them also not being allowed to raise money or apply for grants to hold their elections. It's just adding to the long list of things that that show that folks don't want fair and free elections in our state, and it's really, really
Obvious.
yeah.
Sad.
I think Allie had a question before I move on to other things. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, perhaps you're going to speak on it now, the whole Medicaid expansion mess, and if it passes, how long it would take to go through Supreme Court again. And secondly, the likelihood of the ballot issue passing, it's pretty terrifying. That's how we get progress, besides you, in Missouri.
Yeah, that's a great one to talk about, and one that's been very important to us. So again, Representative Cody Smith, the chairman of the Budget Committee in the House, it has a bill that's moving that essentially, I don't want to say it undoes Medicaid expansion because that's not an accurate representation of it, but what it does is it takes the population and does shrink it. So it will undo some pieces of it, and then it makes it essentially harder to get approval. So there's additional pieces of it. It would be a ballot initiative. It's a House Joint Resolution 117, in case anyone's tracking, and it would bring it back to the ballot, and essentially voters would have to vote again to change Medicaid expansion. That bill has made it all the way through the House. It has made it through the Senate committee, and it is being currently held in the Government Accountability and Fiscal Oversight Committee. So it is sitting right there. What I will tell you in terms of the things that are giving me hope around this discussion, the chairman of what we call GAFO, the Government Accountability Fiscal Oversight Committee in the Senate, is my Senator Lincoln Huff, who is a Republican, but he voted for Medicaid expansion. So he has been a loud supporter of Medicaid, and now he is the one who is overseeing whether or not this bill moves forward. So he and I have spoken a lot off the record about his plans, and he is not intending to let it out of that committee to the Senate floor. Obviously, there are 2 weeks left, and there are pressures and things that I'm not going to pretend to understand from their side of the aisle, but he does not want that to pass, and I can tell you that. So if it does, then yes, to your point, it would get challenged. It would go back through the whole process again. My knowledge of how it would work, and I am not an attorney. I know David is on here, so maybe he can jump in if I say anything wrong here. But that it would be held until it goes through that process. So we wouldn't see any change in who is covered in Medicaid until that bill would make it through that challenge at the Supreme Court level. And then it would have to go back to the ballot. And then if, depending on what the voters decided. So a long way before we have some serious concern on who is allowed to apply for Medicaid and get coverage, but it is a real thing. And when you have the budget chairman of the House saying he doesn't want these folks to get covered, we all should be concerned. But that said, with the expansion population that we currently have, Medicaid is fully funded in the budget as of now. So I am very happy about where the current state is, as long as that bill doesn't move forward. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so other bills of note. I will preface this conversation and say that we only have 2 weeks left. And yes, anything can happen in 2 weeks. I have seen a bill be presented and passed through the entire process in 3 days because the governor and the Speaker of the House wanted it done. So don't let anyone tell you that 2 weeks is not enough time to do a lot of damage or to pass a bunch of things, because it absolutely is. But that said, the fact that there are only 6 bills on the governor's desk so far is good and bad, depending on how you want to look at it. From my seat as the Democratic leader, things are great because it is complete chaos and there's not a lot passing across the finish line. And there are a lot of really concerning bills right now. Things that we are really paying attention to, just to put on your radar. And Pam did allude to some of this before. There are a lot of really bad ballot initiative reform bills that are afoot. Everything from, changing the way signatures are gathered, changing the constitutional thresholds of what can pass and what can't, making it essentially all of this stuff, making it harder for citizens to hold us accountable and to create policy, which Missouri has some really great initiative petition policies in place. We are one of the better states that allows for that. And we have seen it with Medicaid expansion, against right to work, all of these really wonderful things that citizens have been able to get done. And that's under attack right now. So there are about 7 bills that have been filed, kind of moving through the process, but there is one that we're really paying close attention to. That all rests in the hands of the Senate. All of those bills have made it through the House side, and they're over there on the Senate. We are also paying close attention to, we discussed the Medicaid bill, this elections bill that we had briefly talked about before. That is also over on its way to the Senate, so paying attention to that one. And then there are the more social justice things that we're paying attention to. Of course, there are attacks against our trans children that have gotten a lot of national attention. I'm happy to talk through that if y'all have questions. And then critical race theory legislation continues to get thrown on. We've seen on the House side this coming up as amendments. So the bills themselves for these big social issues are not getting a lot of traction. But what the Republicans are doing are throwing them onto good bills as amendments to then either killing everything and unfortunately hijacking some good bills, or it then gives it an opportunity to be able to make it at least to conference. And when we get to conference committee again, I briefly mentioned that that's when the two sides will fight with each other, and you never know how that's going to land. And so right now, the big thing has been the trans kiddos, and we've seen that now. We've had that debate 3 different times, and each one on the House is making it over through the Senate. I am happy to say on that specific issue, on Thursday was the first time it came up on the Senate floor. Senators Lauren Arthur and Greg Razor really led the filibuster, and they just eventually didn't have a quorum anymore, and everyone went home. So it was kind of nice to see our Democrats over there just say, nope, we're not going to let this happen, and the Republicans kind of gave up. So we are paying close attention to those bills as well. Then there is a really bad unemployment bill that is definitely got our concerns. Representative Jay Eggleston is the sponsor of it. It's made it through the House. It's now over in the Senate. And what it does, and this is a little different than unemployment cuts that we've seen in years past, what this actually does is tie the unemployment that folks qualify for based on the unemployment rate in our state. The obvious concern with that is unemployment rates are different no matter where you live. What's going on here in Springfield shouldn't dictate what happens to you all in Columbia, right? And what folks are able to get. You pay into unemployment, you should be able to get your unemployment, and that's how it should be. So this bill actually changes it based on what the unemployment rate is. There is a corresponding weekly number for what folks would be able to get. This is an extremely bad bill for workers, and we've been really fighting it as much as we can. I want to give a big shout out to Senator Doug Beck, who is one of our union guys over in the Senate, and he's been working really hard to try to keep that one at bay. And so that one is of big concern. This time of year, there's a lot of negotiations happening, and there's a lot of, hey, if you need my votes on this, these are the bills I want you to kill, or these are the bills that I want to get through clean, that I want to pass without this trash amendment on it. And those are the kind of things that my role really plays right now, is those negotiations. I will tell you the unemployment bill is definitely top of my concern of it passing the finish line without being able to be clawed back because of those negotiations. Adrian, did you have a comment on that or question?
Yeah, being as I'm a union carpenter, the construction industry is pretty volatile. So when things are good, construction is busy and people are employed, but whenever things slow down, whether it's the economy or whatever, whether it's IBEW electricians or anybody that's working construction, whether it's union or not, they have to take advantage of unemployment sometimes because they've got to wait for the next job to start or whatever. Like I'm in a lull right now until probably next week until the new job starts. So that unemployment helps them keep along. It's not much. Trust me, it's not much. But it is. And I think the last numbers I read, the average time to find a new career, and I mean career, not a job, is 22 weeks. So if they're, it's a big deal. That's all I want.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. It's a huge deal. And, especially with the pandemic and everything we've been seeing as well, there are a lot of things outside of workers' control on whether or not they are able to go to work at that moment in time. And yes, with the construction industry, as Adrian said, there are months out of the year that they just don't work, but that's how it functions. And so they pay into unemployment knowing that. That's factored into salaries. That's factored into how folks budget, is knowing that that's going to be there. And the employers willingly pay into it. This isn't what frustrates me about the unemployment conversation. As you all know, employers are paying into this, and this is something that exists that isn't pulling from state coffers. There's a whole separate fund for the unemployment fund, and this argument is just, in my opinion, nothing more than wanting to make it so that workers have a harder time surviving. There is no real logic to this in my mind. But anyway, that one is definitely, when I look at the things that we're negotiating out and things that I think may cross the finish line, is definitely top concern for me. I'm happy to pause and answer questions. If anybody's got any.
I'll jump in. Could you tell me the number of the bill that you're referring to with this unemployment?
I cannot offhand, but I can get it for you and send it to you immediately. I can email back any of the questions that folks have that I don't know the answer to. But yes, I can get that for you.
And the other one that I wanted the bill number on was the one you said was moving fastest on the initiative petition process.
We'll get you that one too. Not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
The unemployment bill's in the announcement.
Well, there are multiple.
Yeah, I can get you the specific one that I think has.
Just to be sure I've got the right one.
Yeah,
thank you.
I can definitely do that. The one who has the most legs that we think will cross the finish line or may. Absolutely. Other questions?
Alice?
Guns. I mean, I read Martha's election report before you talked today, and I'm in Colorado right now, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like, so it's actually good to hear you, because I had read that the Republicans are fighting each other some, but guns, it's against the Constitution. They're at it again.
Yeah, this is another one where there have been a ton of bills moving, particularly through the House, dealing with guns. The biggest one that had the most traction on our side was guns on transit. So folks being allowed to carry with a CCW on our public buses and Amtrak's as well. And so that one did make it through the House. It's over on the Senate side. To be honest with you, I'm not as concerned that those are going to cross the finish line. I'm just really not. When we're having discussions, particularly with the conservative caucus, the folks who are the ones causing all the chaos, that's just not one of the highlights for them. They were able to get through, and frankly, I believe, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, that one falls in the category for me of political talking points, trying to get their video of them talking on the floor so they can use it in their commercial or whatever, and be the most extreme on that topic. That said, again, 2 weeks out, I don't want to tell you all not to be concerned. But out of all of the gun bills, the one that would be the highest priority in terms of passage would be that guns on transit, if you were to pick one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Crystal, this is Shaman. Hi.
Hi.
Can you just talk a little bit? I know you mentioned it briefly, but last year at this time we passed, there were you all, MoLeg passed 10 policy bills out, and this year we're kind of set for like there's not as many up there, and we're still, you know, like you said, next week is the budget. Like, do you have a sense of, you know, how many of these omnibus bills might get so big that they fall apart versus, you know, that they implode, versus like that, you know, what kinds of stuff you all think that you know, the numbers of stuff you might think might actually pass?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will tell you that this year compared to years past, it is the hardest for me to give you an answer to that, just because it is so chaotic in the Senate, and that one is really, the Senate is going to determine everything at this point. I have honestly, y'all, heard conversation that they might pass the budget and just sine die and go home. Folks are so mad right now, and it really boils down to the congressional maps and the fact that it didn't get done and that it's not going to get done. And so you have the conservative caucus, you all heard at the beginning saying 7-1 map and calling everything else a Pelosi map. And, you know, so there are still so many feelings in the Senate right now that it's really honestly hard to say how much, if anything, they're going to let through. I think that, again, these omnibus bills that you referred to, there are several that the House have sent over, and there's going to be more. We've got the elections one that we briefly talked about. There is an education one, 681 is the number. That the underlying bill, we really like it. It has to do with reading initiatives that we have been told as recently as yesterday that there's going to be a ton of amendments on there. Chuck Basie has the anti-trans language that he's going to try to get on. So there's a whole lot of amendments that are going to get piled up onto that bill, and we'll send that one over. You know, so there are a few ones that I'm concerned with. The good thing about these omnibus bills, and I'll pause and say, in case anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, kind of at the end of session, what we see them do is they'll take a bill, usually it's a good bill that both parties like, and then folks will, what we call Christmas tree, just pile on amendment after amendment. So you'll take a bill that started as 3 pages that ends up being 200 or 300 pages by the end of it. And it's a disastrous way to create policy. I think it is just something that should not be happening, and it shouldn't even be allowed, but it happens every year. And so then we have these giant omnibus bills that are just probably 20 or 30 different bills all piled together. The one good thing about those is often they are unconstitutional because there are things that are unrelated to the underlying bill, and because they aren't related to the topic at hand, they often get struck out. And so it's frustrating when it happens. I know as a legislator, you don't have time to know ever what you're voting on. You'll often see Democrats just vote no because we don't know what's in it, and I'm not going to vote for something that could be potentially really bad. But that is a very long way to say to you, Shaman, that I really don't know the answer to that question right now. The senators are so volatile that they really, if for those of you who haven't seen, like they're not even in there for more than 4 hours at a time before everything blows up and they just go home. What we've seen, you know, earlier in the session, they would have these big filibusters, and that was happening for several hours at a time. But the floor leader has essentially just been like, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And so they just pack up and go home. Most nights they're out of there by like 6 o'clock, and that's really odd. That's not normal for this time of year. And the same thing happened on Thursday when they started debating the anti-trans language. Folks just went home because they didn't want to have the fight. And so it's hard to say at what point we might see the conservative caucus like get that fire underneath them to really try to do something. But as of right now, they're just so mad at each other. Like, I'm hopeful that just none of it happens. And my dogs are freaking out, so I'll mute if anybody has a question.
I have another question. I hate to keep dominating, but I'm real interested in anti-environment or anti-renewable energy legislation, and I understand that there is at least one bill that would totally bog down the regulatory process for any such projects. Are those moving, or what do you
Yeah,
think?
that's a good question. There have been several bills this year filed that kind of my barometers are Renew Missouri and Sierra Club, and when they are up in arms, my ears perk up and I pay attention. There have been several of those this year that have been filed. I would say the big one that we are still paying attention to right now, 2 weeks out, is what's called the Advanced Recycling Bill, is the title of it. In fact, it is the exact opposite and doesn't do anything that we want it to do. And all of us voted against it. That is by Representative Jeff Knight. I will say I don't want to give you the big summary of it because I am not an expert on this area and this bill in particular, but it did make it through the House. It's over on the Senate. And that one is the one that I think at this point, everybody's still kind of concerned about.
And there's a good article, I think, in today's Missouri Independent that explains that more for the other folks that are listening.
Thank you for that. Yeah, but that is the one that still, our eyes are still paying attention to.
Pam, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'd like you to speak about reproductive rights.
Great. Thanks, Pam. Yeah, there have been, of course, we've been in the national media a lot this year for lots of terrible things. One of them being access to women's healthcare. The big one that has gotten the most attention that I'm sure you all saw in the news was the bill that went after ectopic pregnancies by Representative Seitz over in the House. Then there are a few bills that mimic some of Texas's language in terms of the women being able to be turned in and doctors being charged with felonies and all of those things, that the giant Texas bill that everyone knows about. Those bills, to be very honest with you, Pam, have not been getting as much attention as we expected them to. I feel like that's kind of in the category again where they wanted their talking points in campaign commercials. They got them. We haven't heard about them since. Now, that said, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods by any means. There is language in House Bills 10 and 11, 2010 and 2011, which are the budget bills. You'll see most of us voted no on that. That goes after funding for Medicaid patients through Planned Parenthood. So there is language in there that says any provider who provides abortion can't get Medicaid payments. So not that Medicaid can't go to abortions, we already know it doesn't, but I, as a Medicaid patient, I want to choose Planned Parenthood to get my birth control from. Per the federal government, I have a right as a Medicaid patient to choose my provider. There is language in the House version of the budget that says that patients can't go and choose a provider that provides abortion. So essentially saying, I can't go to Planned Parenthood for my birth control. That is against the federal regulations when it comes to Medicaid payments. And so there is an argument to be made that if that does pass, it will, well, we know Planned Parenthood will sue in court. We have won that battle every time that it has gone to court. But what that does for patients, and this is what's important, is it delays. There are patients right now going to Planned Parenthood to try to seek just regular access to healthcare, and Planned Parenthood, staff are saying, hey, just so you know, we can't cover this right now because it's held up in court. And so there is a huge issue when this language is put in. Even if it's turned out to be unconstitutional, we are going to see a gap in care. And so that's in 2010 and 2011. It's either 2010 or 3000. I'm sorry, 2010 and 2011. The budget bills that is in the House version. Again, we go to conference. Hopefully that gets stripped out and we won't have to actually deal with that in the conference committee, but that's yet to be determined. So while the abortion bills that we've seen filed that really attack women and providers are not getting as much attention as they have in years past in terms of actually getting to the governor's desk, there is a lot of concern and there is reality to those budget bills being able so that folks can't get care.
Another question is about the congressional districts, and I don't understand why they just don't go ahead and send it to the judges. It's obvious they can't agree.
Yeah, so two things of that. One, both parties have already filed lawsuits to ask for the courts to do that. So at any moment, the courts could take it up and do it themselves at any moment. But as of right now, they're not doing so. I don't know, I can't speak for the courts, but maybe they're just waiting to see what we do in the legislature because there is still time. Why they don't just send it? I mean, the reality is the moment it goes to the courts, the Democrats fare better. And we know that, they know that. because the numbers show that we should actually have, 3 seats in Missouri and not the 2 that we have. But that said, I can't tell you why they just haven't just said we're done at this point. I think that there are still conversations happening behind the scenes where they're trying to come up with some sort of agreement. But everything I'm told that the Conservative Caucus will not sit down at the table. So I'm hopeful that 2 weeks from now the courts will pick it up and we'll get a map that is favorable. Another question?
Earlier, you mentioned having a lot of putting some good things in the budget, and I think also maybe to be used from the ARPA funds. Could you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
The Democrats put in.
Yeah, the thing I'm most excited about is because it was something I worked on. So I'll start with that one. We were able to get in the budget $20 million for childcare for state workers to have on-site childcare, $10 million for that, and then $10 million for small business owners to be able to apply to create on-site daycares or do a co-op type situation for childcare for their workers. One of the biggest things that we've heard from employers is childcare is such a huge problem. And then as we talked about a little bit earlier, our state employees don't get paid anything. And so the least we can do is give them on-site childcare that is a benefit to those workers. So we were able to get $20 million in, and I'm very excited about that one. Some other things, let's see, parents as teachers got a big pay raise. And then we also got after school funding for our organizations like Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA to be able to access. We did a lot of some smaller, $100,000, $200,000 for for different organizations, nonprofits in a lot of our communities, doula foundations, again, some after school and before school care, some recovery dollars for some of our recovery organizations. I'm trying to think through. We have a huge stack that's like this big of a packet of things that we were able to get done, and I'm really excited about it. But all that to say, I'm going to pause and just say, we still have to go through conference, and all of these things still have to be held and make it all the way through to the finish line. But I would say that the big ones are like the childcare and the parents as teachers, a lot of stuff around school and those types of things. There was money put in for, we had briefly talked about election authorities. There was some money that Yolanda Young from Kansas City got in to provide our election authorities with dollars to be able to make sure that every precinct has on site a machine for folks with disabilities to be able to access. So I know you guys in Boone have some great resources there through Brianna, but not everyone in the state has access to those machines for our blind folks and hearing impaired folks to have access to. And so we got some money in the budget for that to be able to increase voting access for individuals. Trying to think through some of the other really, really exciting ones that we're proud of, but the list has a lot. If you follow our Facebook page, I'm going to do a big plug here, Missouri House Dems. There's the campaign page and then the legislative page, Mo-Leg Dems is that one. We actually did a highlight of some of the big ones and highlighted those representatives who were able to get some of that done. So I would check that out. But I will tell you, once the budget is done, we will compile a document that we'll send around to anyone who wants it that lists out everything that the Democrats were able to accomplish this year in the budget. And I think that's really important. I'm just going to kind of give a big plug on the campaign side of things. What the president has done by sending this money to the states and then Democrats being able to access this money and advocate for our communities and do really cool things for workers and for teachers and for all the things that we all care about, we need to be shouting that from the rooftops of the things that we've been able to accomplish because of the president and what he has done. You're going to see these Republicans say, we fully funded the formula, we've done school transportation, we did all this great stuff. No, they didn't. President Biden did that. And we need to take ownership of that because these folks have been cutting this stuff year after year after year. And for them to try to take credit like they care about it, we need to not let happen. And so we will send out a document to everyone through the DLN, through the legislative network that has all of the accomplishments that we were able to do this year.
Crystal, you mentioned a couple of Facebook pages. Could you put those in the chat?
I definitely will.
Thank you.
And I will Google those real quick and make sure that I do it right.
Thanks. I just
And Shamin had a question earlier. I missed her. And
I was just going to ask, do you feel like conferences will happen like Wednesday of this coming week, or?
Yeah, so they were, I will tell you, the Senate was supposed to announce their budget conferees yesterday so that we would be able to start that on Tuesday. They did not do so. So I don't know. We're hopeful by Wednesday it will start because again, we have to get it done by the 6th. But the Senate did not name their conferees, which is really wildly untraditional. That should have happened so that we could get noticed up because we have to have a 24-hour notice before those committees can meet per the rules. And so I'm a little nervous, but I would say we're hoping for Wednesday for the budget conference. Other questions that folks have? I'm looking up those Facebook pages as we're.
David, you still have your hand up? David, do you still have a question? David Mallory?
No, thanks.
Okay, so I am putting 2 Facebook pages in here. The first one is our policy page, and I say that this is run by the state employees who work through the legislature. So that one you won't see the political side of things, but you'll see what's happening in Jefferson City. He does work for the Democratic caucus, but he's not a campaign staffer, so it's a little bit of a different lens. And then this one is the House Democratic Campaign Committee, which is the campaign arm for the House Democrats. So this one I'm putting in right now. So if you want campaign updates, they also run the DLN, those folks. That is the second one here. Give me just 1 second. And of course, now my Facebook isn't working right.
Hello.
Okay.
Wendy has a question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. It's bad when you don't have one of those yellow hands. 2 things. To jump back to the environment for a minute, I was puzzled at your comment about a recycling bill. I'm not familiar with that. The Knights bill that I know about, it's 1852, that would create a net metering task force to look at to scrutinize solar, and part of it to determine what the value of solar is. One good part of it would be that it would enable, it would prohibit actually homeowner associations from banning solar panels on homes in subdivisions and so forth. But there's been a bad amendment put on it, I understand, that they're trying to get rid of. And whether, so it seems uncertain, but I don't know anything about a recycling bill.
Yes, so it is House Bill, I just looked it up while you were talking, House Bill 2485. They're calling it advanced recycling, and I'm putting that in quotes because it is not something that we are in favor of. It's actually referred to within the environmental industry chemical recycling. So it's I'm kind of reading a bill brief right here. It's a series of chemical processes that is to transform plastic into something else. The most common of this is deals a lot with like feedstock. I guess is where they use it the most. And it can be potentially transformed into a new plastic, but in reality, it's rarely happening in significant quantities. And so what we're seeing though is this chemical recycling is actually an environmental health risk. Plastic waste containing toxins that come out through the heating process that they're doing or they're wanting to get done. Essentially what this bill is, so again, it's 2485. And I can send a summary via email to you.
No, I am, yeah, I do, yeah, I am familiar with that. Thank you. It is a bad bill.
Yes, and what I will tell you, and this isn't really kind of behind the scenes stuff, but the reality of how this stuff works, this bill came about because a business owner who was in Georgia who wanted to do this new process and make money off of it, Georgia wouldn't pass legislation that allowed him to do that. So he came to Missouri and he literally went up to Jeff Knight and said, hey, I'd like to buy property in your district and I want to do XYZ with it. I'll employ all these people, but I need you guys to pass this bill for me to do it. And he said, okay, let me try. And so he filed this bill because of that conversation. And the reality is this has disastrous effects on our environment, which is why Georgia didn't pass it. And so he's trying to do that for this business owner. I have no idea who they are or if they're contributing campaign wise. Like, I won't get into any of that stuff, but that's what this is. It's trying to change the law for this one business to be able to do what they want to do here. So yeah, it's a frustrating thing.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, from the Missouri Independent article says that the products of this process are then in turn used for fuel, which is even dirtier than fossil fuel. So even the end result of it is bad for the environment.
Yeah, thank you.
Crystal, there's some very nice comments in the chat for you if you get a chance to read that. Steve Calloway and David Robertson posted some things.
Thank you all so much. Well, if there are no other specific questions to legislation, the one thing that I'll say before we hop off is, there are 2 weeks left, and we don't really know how this is going to fare. But I do want to give a huge shout out to the Democratic caucus. There are only 49 of us, but we have been able to stop some really, really bad stuff from crossing the finish line and been able to work in really strategic, amazing ways. But the reality is, as I've said before, and I say it everywhere I go, we need more of us to be able to really, the conversations shouldn't continue to be like stopping this bad stuff from happening. I want to be able to come to you guys and say, look at all this really great stuff that we're able to do. Like, look at us passing all these wonderful bills. But we can't get to that point until we elect more Democrats. And so, I would love to see that you guys started with DLN announcements. The House Democratic Campaign Committee, the campaign arm of what we do, really wasn't much in existence until about 2 years ago. And we have been working really hard. The members of the legislature right now in the Democratic caucus have been working really hard to try to create infrastructure on the campaign side of things, not only to inform all of you guys of how you can be active and engaged, but also to elect more folks so that we can actually get Democratic priorities across the finish line in a real substantial way. And so if you are not familiar with our website, Dave actually put it in the web, in the browser there. So thank you so much in the chat. Please check out what we're working on. We have amazing candidates, some of which who are on this call now, who really need help. And we are really working hard to create that infrastructure on the campaign side of things that outlasts me. I only got 2 years left here, but with Missouri, we've been lacking that infrastructure and really a place for, I know, volunteers and folks to go for information, to figure out how to be engaged and how to continue to elect more Democrats. And so check out our website if you haven't yet, moledgedems.com, and feel free to reach out to me anytime if you want more information on who our candidates are, where our investments are going to go, which seats I think we can flip, who needs help to hold on to their seats, because we have a lot of incumbents now with harder districts like myself. I'm now in a 50-50 district, and I wasn't last cycle. And so, there's a lot of work to be done, and I would love to share some of that. And I can even come back another time and talk to you guys specifically about campaign stuff after session if you want. But there's a lot of work to be done, and we need your help.
Alice Turner.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
Crystal, I was looking forward to being able to elect a Boone County state senator. And I know that stuff. So is it likely we're going to go into the November election with not changing districts? Is that possible?
Yeah, so the Senate districts have been finalized. And so we have those maps now. Boone County is great, like really great. Now, Caleb is not up for that seat is not up for election this year. So it'll be 2 years from now. I am very hopeful that we will flip that seat red to blue in the next election cycle. The numbers are way better. The same for Greene County and my Senate seat as well. And so we are really hopeful in the coming cycles to make some headway. I mean, I will tell you guys, the reality is 2022 is going to be a tough year. The seats are really good for us in terms of redistricting. We now have 57 House seats that went to President Biden, where we had 49 before. There are 49 Democrats elected. So that tells you we've got a lot of great growth ahead of us. But it's a non-presidential year. Inflation, Ukraine, the list goes on, why folks are going to not want to come out and vote. So it's going to take some time. we'll flip a couple seats this year. We got a lot of work to do to hold on to them. The next cycle, we'll flip 4 or 5 more. The next cycle, we'll flip more. But the good news is that there is a path out and the numbers don't lie. And for you guys in Boone County, that Senate seat is definitely winnable in the next election cycle.
Thank you, Crystal. And thank you for coming and spending this speaking to us today. And we're doing everything we can here in Boone County to send at least a couple more.
I know, and I'm so
Democrats your way.
excited about it.
Crystal, on this is Carl, and on behalf of the Boone County Muleskinners, and so I too am at a 50-50 district, if you will, so, as you might imagine. But thank you for coming, and thank you for giving us all of this information, and for your small band of that we want to expand to a larger band of advocates on behalf of a lot of the folks that represent this group. Thank you. For all
Thank
you do.
you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I will email back the information about the unemployment and the initiative petition bills as well.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. Thanks everyone for being here, and come back next week. We'll have another meeting. Pam shared who our speaker is next week, and we've got an executive committee meeting. So I'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
And please contact me if you're going